Start out with timelines. First documented case of multiple myeloma, actually from 1844. I'm sure the disease has been around since the mankind is around, but at least it was first reported in 1844. The name of the patient, and at that time HIPAA was not a problem. This is something which is more of a modern problem, was Sarah Newberry, and the diagnosis was made on autopsy. Patient presented with fatigue and bone pain. Skipping to the first real treatment, it was ethyl carbamate or urethane in 1947, and it showed drop in immunoglobulin levels as well as some improvement in anemia. Another major milestone, the development of a Jury-Salmon staging system, which was more or less replaced by the international staging system in 2005. And then now all the focus is on disease stratification according to the cytogenetics and molecular classifications, and even more importantly now with the gene expression profiling and genome sequencing. So a lot of progress has been made, but still the treatments according to the disease stratification have not been refined so far. But that is obviously a work in progress. So a little bit about the treatment timeline. So melphalan was first used successfully in 1958, and then one major landmark was this combination of melphalan and prednisone. First reported by one of our colleagues and my mentor, one of my mentors, Dr. Ray Alexanian, which was a combination of melphalan plus prednisone, was found to be superior to melphalan alone in a randomized trial that was published in the Journal of American Medical Association in 1969. And this remained more or less the standard treatment for multiple myeloma until the late 1990s. And then stem cell transplant came into picture in the early 80s. First the syngeneic transplant, and then the development of the high-dose melphalan, followed by autologous stem cell transplant, which was first reported by Terry McElwain from Royal Marsden Hospital, and then Bart Balogi from MD Anderson Cancer Center. And then this new era of novel therapy was ushered in by this first report of the use of thalidomide, where Dr. Balogi started this trial in 1997, and 84 patients were treated, and with a 32% response rate with single-agent thalidomide. And that was the start of the era of novel agents, followed by bortezomib and lenalidomide, and now carfilzomib, pomalidomide, and many more to come. So with this, we know today that the outcome of patients with multiple myeloma is definitely improving, although we are still not curing multiple myeloma. But as you can see from this elegant study that was published in Blood by the group from Mayo Clinic, they divided patients who were treated before 1996 and after 1996, and you can see the separation of curve in overall survival. They looked at patients on smaller time intervals, like 6-year intervals. And again, as you can see, that the patients treated between 2001 and 2006 have the best overall survival. And that is also improving and is only getting better with time, as some of the newer studies are showing. So why is that? This improvement in myeloma outcome is real. And this is based on a number of factors. Some of them that I'm going to briefly touch upon: the optimal use of autologous stem cell transplant. Actually, Dr. Palmer would be talking more about the role of autologous stem cell transplant. Of course, the use of novel agents, which are not that novel anymore, but thalidomide, lenalidomide, and bortezomib. Also very important is the improvement in supportive care and better understanding of disease biology and emerging targeted therapies, which is the wave of the future and would only improve the outcome in multiple myeloma and may also make the goal of achieving cure a possibility or actually a reality. So first I will talk a little bit about the novel agents and then try to put things in perspective with that. So thalidomide was the first so-called novel agent. It was marketed in the 1950s as a sedative with about 10 different trade names. But in 1961, it was discovered to be teratogenic, and about 10,000 infants were affected by thalidomide, and it was, of course, taken off the market. It stayed for various conditions, including erythema nodosum, leprosum, and some other autoimmune disorders. But in 1997, Dr. Barloghi started a trial due to its supposed anti-angiogenic properties in multiple myeloma, and that led to this response rate with single-agent thalidomide of more than 30%, and that ushered in the era of novel therapies. So after thalidomide, of course, lenalidomide was inevitable. It's an analog of thalidomide. It was developed to enhance the efficacy and to minimize the toxicity. And the overall response rate with single-agent lenalidomide, and the response was defined as about 25% improvement in the myeloma disease parameters, or a minimal response to define it. It was 71%, and this was reported by Paul Richardson and his group from Dana-Farber, and it was published in Blood in 2002. And subsequently, in an upfront trial, these were for the relapsed patients, lenalidomide in combination with dexamethasone achieved a response rate of 91% in newly diagnosed patients with multiple myeloma, and it was approved in the United States by the Food and Drug Administration in 2006, initially for patients who have failed at least one line of treatment. The third drug from these novel agents is bortezomib. So proteasome, or inhibition of proteasome or ubiquitin proteasome system can cause apoptosis, predominantly in rapidly dividing malignant cells. So one of my colleagues, Robert Orlowski, led the first clinical trial in hematologic malignancies using bortezomib as single agent, and it showed striking anti-myeloma activity. 9 out of 9 patients treated with bortezomib showed a response, and this led to the approval by the FDA for multiple myeloma in 2003. An interesting thing, so Bob Orlowski's father worked, he was a famous scientist who worked on proteasome and understanding the ubiquitin proteasome system. So it's quite interesting that his son actually led the first trial of proteasome inhibitor, and actually the first trial of the next generation of proteasome inhibitor as well. So putting it all together, we see this improvement in responses in myeloma or outcome in myeloma due to advances in induction therapy, advances in stem cell transplant, advances in post-transplant consolidation and maintenance, and supportive care, and in relapse disease. So I'm going to briefly touch upon what those advances are, and I'm only going to focus on published randomized trials based on which some of the questions were asked before this presentation. So first, I'm going to talk about how these newer agents have been incorporated in induction therapy for so-called transplant-eligible patients, which most of the world has defined as patients who are 65 years or younger, or who have good organ system function. So I would talk about 4 different combinations. So one is bortezomib plus dexamethasone, again, based on at least one large phase 3 trial that was conducted by the International French Myeloma Group. It was published in Journal of Clinical Oncology in 2010, where patients with bortezomib plus dexamethasone, about 400 plus patients were treated, and the comparison was bortezomib plus dexamethasone versus the old regimen of vincristine, adriamycin, and dexamethasone. And they also had a consolidation arm with a combination called DCEP. But the bottom line was that there was a higher complete remission and near complete remission rate with bortezomib plus dexamethasone compared to the VAD arm. And there was also, these patients went on to receive autologous stem cell transplant, and after autologous transplant, the progression-free survival was also almost significantly better in the bortezomib plus dexamethasone arm. And another interesting offshoot of this trial was that they looked at patients with high-risk chromosomal abnormalities. And one of the high-risk abnormalities that's defined in myeloma is translocation 414. And patients who were treated with bortezomib plus dexamethasone had better responses and superior outcome when it was compared to the VAD arm. So that led to bortezomib and dexamethasone being one of the frontline combinations used in transplant-eligible patients. And National Comprehensive Cancer Network, a group of experts for different diseases in the US that reviews different treatment options and recommends that which one should be the category 1, which is that the strongest evidence exists, recommended bortezomib plus dexamethasone as category 1. The second combination is bortezomib plus doxorubicin plus dexamethasone. So this was compared to, it was called PAD because PS341 was the name of bortezomib at that time, compared with, again, the old agent VAD. And this was published by the Dutch Belgian group. And again, they showed that there were better responses and better progression-free survival with the bortezomib-containing regimen, again, making it a category 1 recommendation as induction regimen. Then, of course, bortezomib, dexamethasone, and thalidomide, which was added to this combination in at least 2 different groups, the Spanish group as well as the Italian group, led 2 randomized trials, and they both showed significant improvement in response rates. And this is even before patients went to transplant. 31% patients achieve a complete or near complete remission. These numbers were unheard of with older induction regimens where it used to be about 5% or below with melphalan, prednisone, or VAD. So definitely much more potent with higher response rates with these combinations. And then these benefits were seen even after autologous stem cell transplant. And finally, the lenalidomide plus dexamethasone, also a category 1. And this is based on a couple of trials. One was lenalidomide dexamethasone compared to high-dose dexamethasone. Again, showed improvement in response rate and progression-free survival. This was a SWOG, a cooperative group trial in the US. And the second one was an interesting trial where, again, 2 different combinations of lenalidomide and dexamethasone. One was the standard dose where dexamethasone was used for 12 days in each cycle versus a lower dose dexamethasone, but same dose of lenalidomide, where dexamethasone was used for only 4 days in each cycle, or weekly dexamethasone. Interestingly, the response rates were higher with high-dose dexamethasone, but because of higher treatment-related mortality, 1-year overall survival was superior in the low-dose dexamethasone arm, which has more or less become the standard treatment, at least for the older patients with multiple myeloma where this combination is used. So these 4 combinations, bortezomib plus dexamethasone, Velcade, thalidomide, dexamethasone, bortezomib, adriamycin, dexamethasone, and lenalidomide, dexamethasone, at least in phase 3 trials have shown superiority. Then come the patients who are considered non-eligible for transplant or ineligible for transplant. And at least in the European countries are defined as patients who are 65 years or older or patients with certain comorbidities. And in those patients, since they are not going to transplant, alkylating agents can be used. So as I showed you in the beginning, melphalan prednisone was the standard treatment based on randomized trial, and it remained the standard of care until these randomized trials where melphalan prednisone plus one of the novel agents, thalidomide or bortezomib or lenalidomide, showed in phase 3 trials that you can achieve superior response rates and longer event-free, and in some trials even overall survival. So there were at least 3 different trials of melphalan, prednisone, and thalidomide, at least 1 large trial of melphalan, prednisone, and bortezomib versus melphalan and prednisone, and then 1 large trial which was published this year in New England Journal of Medicine of melphalan, prednisone, and lenalidomide compared to melphalan and prednisone alone. So in older patients who are not considered transplant eligible, these regimens are considered the frontline treatments. And again, there is no head-to-head comparison, so it depends on the it depends on the treating physician's preference and experience and the availability of drug and cost, etc. So these were the developments in the induction treatment. Next, autologous stem cell transplant. So again, Dr. Parmar is going to talk about that in detail. I would just briefly mention that the role of autologous transplant, there are a couple of issues that still need to be resolved. That is tandem versus single autologous transplant, or autologous versus autologous plus allogeneic transplant. But one issue which is more or less settled, until we'll debate about it later, is high-dose therapy plus single autologous stem cell transplant after induction treatment. And there are two large randomized trials that showed that patients who had an auto transplant after induction had superior event-free and overall survival. The first one was the French trial published in New England Journal in 1996, showed about a 13-month improvement in overall survival. And second one was the Medical Research Council study from England, which also showed an improvement in overall survival with autologous stem cell transplant. So autologous stem cell transplant, and it has obviously contributed to an improvement in response rate and overall survival. And before the availability of these novel agents, this was the most effective way of achieving a high complete response rate. So then, besides induction treatment and autologous transplant, the use of these novel agents when combined with autologous transplant is showing further improvement in response rates as well as progression-free survival. So again, quoting this study from the International Myeloma Group from France, which showed that even after autologous transplant, these patients had higher complete remission rate when they were treated with one of the novel agents than if they were treated with the older combination like VAD. And similar results was shown by the Italian group, which used Velcade, thalidomide, and dexamethasone combination and showed improvement in complete response rate both before and after the transplant, and even after consolidation treatment, in which they used the same combination. And then another thing that has led to improvement recently is the maintenance treatment. And many of you have seen many of the studies. So the maintenance idea has been around for a long time. A number of ineffective treatments have been tried before. But now there are two agents that in randomized phase 3 trials have shown survival advantages. One is thalidomide and other is lenalidomide. So thalidomide, when used in the maintenance setting, lower dose after autologous transplant, the first study was also from France, and it was observation versus pomidronate versus thalidomide, and again it showed significantly better event-free survival as well as overall survival, 4-year overall survival of 87% in the thalidomide arm. So it did show an improvement in overall survival. And the other study is the Australian study, which used thalidomide plus prednisone versus prednisone, and that also showed improvement in progression-free and overall survival, although this treatment, here the treatment was used only for 1 year as opposed to indefinitely in some of the other maintenance studies. And then there was a British trial which showed that thalidomide prolonged the progression-free survival, but not the overall survival. So where thalidomide is available or lenalidomide is not available, it has, and people try to use maintenance treatment, and thalidomide would be a good option. And then lenalidomide, and there were two recent studies, one of which we also participated. The French studies, more than 600 patients, median event-free survival 40 months versus 23 months for patients who got placebo. The US study, CALGB trial, and both these studies were published earlier this year in New England Journal of Medicine, also around 600 patients. And again, you can see that the median event-free survival or median time to progression here was almost 4 years as opposed to a little over 2 years in the placebo group. And the interesting thing about the US study was that there was, after about 2 years, the separation of curve for overall survival as well. So patients who got lenalidomide are showing better overall survival. But a word of caution, so patients who receive this maintenance treatment, of course, have more side effects also, neutropenia, small number, but but significant thromboembolic phenomena, and then this interesting finding of increase in the second primary malignancies, up to 8% in the CALGB study. So, but all these factors have led to an improvement in outcome in multiple myeloma within the last decade to decade and a half. Supportive care has also played a role. So bisphosphonates are important. Pamidronate or zoledronic acid reduces they reduce skeletal-related events, including fractures, lytic lesions, and this has been shown in, again, a randomized trial reported from the Medical Research Council and published in Lancet Oncology last year. And interestingly, in that study, they also found that patients who received bisphosphonates also had a 7-month increase in overall survival, suggesting some anti-myeloma activity as well. And then things like vertebro and kyphoplasty and the appropriate use of antimicrobials with these treatments have also improved the quality of life of these patients. So then I will just briefly go over some of the emerging anti-myeloma therapies. And again, this is an exciting area, there's a lot of development. So we talked about the proteasome inhibitors. So the new generation of proteasome inhibitors, one of them was recently approved in the United States, carfilzomib. It is almost as effective or perhaps even more effective than bortezomib and does not have peripheral neuropathy. So it was approved by the FDA earlier this month. And then the next generation of proteasome inhibitor is also made by the same company that has made bortezomib. It is Millennium 9708. And unlike carfilzomib and bortezomib, it's an oral proteasome inhibitor. And so far, it is also showing activity comparable to the other proteasome inhibitors and is not showing neuropathy that is seen with bortezomib. And then the new immunomodulatory agents, the third generation of thalidomide and lenalidomide, the drug called pomalidomide that is expected to be approved in February of next year. And this is also showing great activity in myeloma, including patients who are resistant to or refractory to thalidomide, Revlimid, and bortezomib. So after that, just the last couple of slides that there've been great development and great research that's ongoing on understanding the biological pathways that are involved in multiple myeloma, which has led to a number of new targets, and those targets are being used as therapeutic targets, and new drugs have been developed. I'll just briefly touch on a few of those. So histone deacetylase inhibitors. As single agents, they have very little activity, but when combined with proteasome inhibitors, they have shown great synergy. So vorinostat is in clinical trial. Again, single agent, very little activity, but in combination with bortezomib, investigators are reporting responses even in bortezomib refractory patients. And the next generation of HDAC inhibitor is panobinostat, which is in clinical trials as well. Then mTOR inhibitors, the mammalian target of rapamycin. Again, 2 of these have been tried in multiple myeloma in combination with bortezomib or lenalidomide, and again showing activity even in patients who had developed resistance to those agents before that. The PI3 kinase pathway or AKT pathway has been involved in a number of cancers, and one of the AKT inhibitor, perifosine, has been tried with bortezomib, and like these other agents, it has shown activity in combination with bortezomib, even in patients who had developed resistance to bortezomib. And then immunotherapy, another great area of development. So there are monoclonal antibodies targeting various antigens and targets on the surface of the plasma cells. Elotuzumab, which targets glycoprotein, which is overexpressed on the surface of plasma cells, it's been tested in clinical trials, both with bortezomib as well as with lenalidomide and dexamethasone, and there was an 82% response rate, even in some patients who were resistant to lenalidomide, and this was published a couple of months ago by Sagar Lonyal from Emory University. Another agent is anti-IL-6 antibody, cetuximab, which is in clinical trial with some promising activity. And then these surface markers that are expressed on the surface of plasma cells are being targeted with various antibodies. Vaccines to basically stimulate and augment the immune responses against myeloma. And we and others are participating in a number of clinical studies. So idiotype vaccine, dendritic cell vaccine, plus a number of peptides isolated from the plasma cells have been used in various vaccine strategies. And then cellular therapeutic strategies where activated T cells targeting specific myeloma proteins are being used in clinical trials. So with all these things, the future direction basically is to, like any malignancy, myeloma is not one disease. There are various types of myeloma, so we have to risk stratify based on cytogenetics, molecular studies, gene expression profiling, and then based on these pathways, and then design treatment according to the risk stratification, which would lead to the development of personalized risk-adapted therapy based on specific molecular or genetic pathways involved in an individual patient. So thank you very much for your attention.